Hi, everybody. I'm Andre, head of product here at PDFTron. And joining me today is Aaron Gravesdale, head of solution engineering. And today we're going to talk to you about redaction. And the way we're going to structure this webinar today is we're going to jump in and show you everything upcoming for WebViewer 8.4 release. And afterwards, I will hand it over to Aaron to run through the live demo of all the WebViewer functionalities. So stay tuned for the first 15 minutes on to get just the latest updates and then kind of jump in full depth of all the different capabilities that WebViewer can do. Okay, so let's go ahead and start first with the latest updates. So in terms of latest updates, I have WebViewer 8.4 version running, and it should be available as soon as Monday. So next Monday, I believe it's April 4th. It's going to go ahead and release and be available through NPM or PDFTron.com download. So for this release, we're really focused on a redaction workflow. That being said, WebViewer already had redaction out of the box, but it didn't offer all the different features and functionalities that I'm about to show you today. So here we introduce a new redact group in the ribbon. So previously, the redact tool was kind of hidden in the edit, which made a lot of confusion for the users. And really, we wanted to make a dedicated workflow for this. So now the users can navigate to the redact group, select the redact tool, and go ahead and pick any sensitive, personally identifiable information, protected health information. So let's go ahead and zoom in on the document just a little bit. So here I have an invoice in front of me, and I can go ahead and maybe select this address and maybe pick up this invoice number. As you can see that as soon as I start making this redaction annotation, there's a new panel now that focuses you just on the marked up redaction. And this is really useful in a case where, we want to separate the redaction annotations, which are just placeholders that haven't been applied yet, and all other annotations that the users have made. Now, in this specific panel, the users can kind of organize a little bit more. It has the same properties as the annotations where we can review and navigate between the different annotations here. However, it's just keeping them in one single place. So from here, if I'm satisfied with all the redactions that I currently have on the screen, I can go ahead and press redact them all. However, there's a new functionality that we added here where from the same redaction panel, I can go ahead and search and redact for any of the specific patterns or terms. So for example, I can search for the words balloons, find them up here on the page. And after I want to go ahead and select specific term, I can go ahead and pick the search result. Will it in turn create a new redaction annotation presented here. Now I can also search for all the different phone numbers that are present. And as you can see that it picks up different strings. And for example, here, the way we search for phone numbers is just the regex pattern. And as you can see, the regex pattern also picks up the credit card number as well, because it falls in the same kind of phone number formatting. So here, what I can do is I can select just the phone numbers that I want to pick up and deselect any of the credit card numbers if I don't want to. And I can do so simply by selecting page 2 or unselecting. And now just the phone numbers have added to the specific markup. Now, for this patterns right here, we are an SDK, and those are just some of the suggestions and some of the regex patterns that we just provide out of the box. We do have APIs available for you to pass in your own regex patterns or even swap out the existing ones and just have a nice place to kind of organize it specifically for your country, for your formatting requirements, and for the information that the user might be looking on the document. Another feature that we have built out is the ability to provide a label text after the redaction actually takes place. So this is great to provide context for the users why this particular redaction has been applied. We can specify that it was a PII or protected health information, or just simply that it was a date of birth. And this is a process called pseudonymization, where we overlay the additional information on top of it. Another use case that I have seen is providing a specific IDs that will then help us to reference what was underneath the content. So you can pass a ID for this particular document, and then the users can kind of go back later and be able to find the ground truth. Another tool that we have built out is actually full page redaction. Sometimes for compliance reasons, we can't just simply go ahead and remove the pages just because, again, it could be that we got to keep the number of pages intact and the same, but instead we can go ahead and specify which pages we want to redact. So I can go ahead and specify that I want to redact the page 2, and it actually gives me a nice preview for the specific page that we're going to go ahead and add for the markup. And as you can see here, it went ahead and did full page redaction. So at this point, we can also go ahead and get a review and approval process started where it goes to the next person. And by the way, any of the functionality that you see in UI can be secured away with permissions. So for example, this redact all button can be secured away specifically for set of users that only have the powers to burn in the redactions. So after I'm done, I can go ahead and hit redact all, and this will apply the redactions and overlay the information on top of them. As you can see here, now it says access 1. Now, the way we do redactions here at PDFTron, they're happening directly client-side and in the browser. And what I mean by that is that there's no server-side calls to perform this functionality. So the redactions are happening securely directly in the browser without any sensitive information ever leaving. Now, it's not just a simple image overlay or the annotation overlay on top of the information, but we actually grab the coordinate information from the annotations created and removing everything underneath, whether it's text, images, any elements. And we're interacting with the PDF at a lower level and removing all those elements. And this allows us to preserve the PDF text and searchability, unlike other solutions that just simply convert it to an image and then black out the pixels. And then it makes the text no longer searchable or readable on the PDF document. So this is just one of the features that we have went through and redid the whole redaction workflow. There is a number of other improvements that we have done. And to catch up with all of them, we have a releases channel on our YouTube channel where you can go ahead and subscribe and stay tuned for all the upcoming features and functionalities that we have. The link is going to be available in the chat on the side. And that's it. That's all for me for WebViewer 8.4. I'm going to hang back and answer any of your product questions. So go ahead and ask me anything related to PDFTron products, and I'll be able to answer them. But for the time being, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Aaron for a live demo portion of this webinar.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Andre. Appreciate it. So I'm just going to share my screen, and then what I'll do is just kind of walk through PDFTron's different offerings. So starting with a bit of a background just about PDFTron as a company, since that kind of helps to sort of set the stage for our different products and what we can provide. So our core toolkit is PDFTron SDK, which is something that we developed really around the time that the PDF specification was first published. So, we've had it around for really a couple of decades now. We've been building up that toolkit, adding functionality that covers the entire document lifecycle. So that can include things like creating documents, maybe like creating PDF documents from scratch or converting from other file formats like Word documents or images. It includes sort of the maturation stage of a document lifecycle. So, the maybe combining of different documents together, doing things like optimizing documents to reduce the size, or stamping page numbers on every page, or watermarking every page for security, or adding encryption or passwords. We have kind of the sort of grown-up stage of the document lifecycle, where the documents are in usage by people, doing things like viewing the documents, filling out forms, making annotations on top of the document, marking up text or searching through text and so on, all the way to sort of the finalization stage of the document lifecycle. So, one of those things when you're sort of finalizing a document, it could be a redaction stage, as Andre was showing. It could be something like converting to an archiving format like PDFA, or again adding additional security through things like passwords encryption, or performing digital signatures, whether those are just e-signatures that just have a signature appearance, or whether we're talking about true digital signatures that include a kind of verifiable signatures so that you can see whether the document was ever modified after having been signed. So all of that is baked into our toolkit. It's all capability that we have directly within PDFTron SDK, because we developed it in-house ourselves. And so we have that same capability in all the platforms that we support. So initially, we just developed PDFTron SDK for Windows, but then we compiled it over to other native platforms like Linux and Mac OS, as well as mobile platforms like iOS and Android and UWP. But what we did a few years back was take that native code base and also compile it to pure JavaScript and WebAssembly. So what that meant was that we could take this same broad array of functionality covering the entire document lifecycle and provide that entirely within the browser. So without any plugins or without calling out to any servers, like external servers hosted, say like by PDFTron or anything like that. Rather, all the functionality takes place within the client-side browser in this pure JavaScript sandbox. And that's quite a powerful paradigm when putting together web-based applications, because that means you can embed a lot of document functionality directly in the viewer. So what I'm going to do is just kind of demo that for the remainder of the webinar. But if you'd like to try any of this out for yourself, you can do so. We make our toolkits available for you to download and test out. And by default, when you're running in your environment, if you just download them, then you will run in demo mode. And what that will let you do is really try out all of our functionality. So it's the same production toolkit as you would run actually, when in production. But just running in demo mode, really the only restriction is just that a watermark is sometimes added to output. So besides that, you can really put the toolkit through its paces. But even prior to downloading, you can actually try out our demo online. So just again, if you were to download it and try it out, the best place to go would be developers. And then if you come to our guides here, then we have detailed walkthroughs for various scenarios. And also, if you click on download here, then that brings you to our download page, and you can try out WebViewer directly. So in some cases, we have direct download links. And then also in our guides here, we have detailed instructions for getting started with the toolkit as well. So if you happen to be integrated with a document management system like, say, SharePoint or Salesforce, then we have integrations directly with those offerings. And if you happen to be using a particular web development toolkit like React or Angular or Vue, then we have specific setup guides for each of those as well. But also WebViewer is very simple to just include onto a web page as an element. So it's very easy to get started with and get up and running with. But to make that even easier, we made this live demo available on our site. So if you just go to pdftron.com/demo, that'll bring you to our WebViewer demo here. And it actually is bringing up WebViewer here inside of this frame here. So if you're curious which part is actually the web viewing technology and which part is maybe sort of the showcase, it's essentially sort of this rectangular area here. So these two toolbars, and then WebViewer document viewing here in this pane here. And then we have quite a few capabilities that we have to offer here listed out on the left to kind of guide you through sort of taking a look at what the toolkit has to offer. You can also upload your own files here as well. So we have the built-in capabilities of viewing PDFs, of course, as you might have guessed from the name, but we also have capabilities for viewing other kinds of documents as well. So one of the most important of those is Office. So many of our customers, require the ability to view and mark up Office files. So we have the built-in capability of converting docx, PPT, PPTX, and XLS and XLSX documents. So basically, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint can be loaded directly here in the viewer, and there's sort of an implicit conversion that goes on when we're loading the document up. And when we've loaded it up, then it's very similar to working with a PDF copy after we load that document. So here, for example, if I load a Word document, then just as if I were looking at a PDF copy of the document here, I'd be able to do things like search the text or select text, add markups. So I can do things like add highlights. Or search for text as well, like similar to what Andre was showing earlier with our redaction workflow, where we can search for different regular expressions. That's all built upon our text searching capability. So we can perform searches within the document's text with support for things like case sensitivity and whole word, as well as the regular expression searching that Andre was showing off in the redaction scenario. And then for the user, they can go through and see some of these different search hits, in a particular document. Notice also here on the left on the right that we have these different search hits listed out in this panel, and that makes it easy to kind of go through and see each one of them. We've also extracted the so-called ambient text around each of the search hits. So, whenever we find that text, we provide the surrounding context of what kind of content was on that document. So that way it's much easier for end users to be able to figure out if this is a search hit that they should pay particular attention to or not. So sometimes documents don't have built-in text search available because they might be made from a scanned image or something like that. So it's very common for a fax machine or a scanning solution to simply take an image and then present that as a PDF copy. And that's a good thing, because then we can kind of normalize our processes on PDF, but it can kind of be a frustrating thing as well, because then users are sometimes presented with a document that is a PDF, but doesn't seem to have any text on it, because like this document here that I'm showing, it might be made up of just a single image on a page. So in those cases, what we recommend is OCRing those sorts of files. Here in this document, for example, if I click Apply OCR, then what it's going to do is take this image-based PDF and send that off to our server-side OCR solution. This is another part of our native offering. And what it's going to do is to take that image-based document, send that up to our OCR solution. And what that will do is actually discover the text that should be on the page. It's using optical character recognition technology, which is able to take image input and decide what that text should actually be. And we see now that when I'm looking at this document, I can actually interact with the text on this file just as if it were a so-called born digital PDF copy. So here from the end user's point of view, it doesn't really look like I'm working with an image-based document at all, but one that actually has selectable text that I can search just as I could previously and make annotations on top of. Now, getting back to this search functionality, a lot of the reason that we're able to perform this kind of feature set here is because of how we've architected the solution. So as I mentioned earlier, webviewer is made up of JavaScript code that runs entirely within the client-side browser. And what it will do is download the actual document itself into the browser's memory and begin operating on that file. And that's very powerful because we actually have the document itself rather than just an image representation or something like that. That's what happens if you go with a solution where the rendering happens in a server-side kind of environment, and then the rendered images are just sent down to the browser. That's a very common architecture that we see, but it's one that we've moved away from because when taking that approach, when just rendering documents to images server side and then sending that down to the browser, that can have a lot of downsides. So one of those could be performance, because if you're doing everything on another machine and then sending a great big image across the network down to your browser, that's a lot of time spent transferring that data, and then you have to store this large image of the rendered page somewhere either in the browser's memory, as well as the server side memory, and that doesn't even get to the issue of CPU usage. So the actual work of rendering a PDF document down to an image is actually computationally non-trivial. There's quite a bit of processing that has to go on with resampling images and rendering fonts and so on. And so as a result, as you add more users, it's very important that you distribute out that processing workload. So if you go with a server-side solution that does all of the rendering server-side, then as you add more users, you're taxing that server more and more. And eventually that forces you to have to provision new servers if you're going to keep up with your users' needs. But if you take the approach of doing all the rendering client-side, as WebViewer does, then the solution naturally scales. As you grow out more users, as you add more users into your system, they're naturally adding their own processing power because they have to access your solution through their client-side machine, and they're performing all of the difficult rendering work within that client-side machine's environment. So that means that as you add more users, you're naturally adding more computational horsepower, and the system performance stays constant, even scaling up to an arbitrary number of users up into the thousands and billions, and however many of users you end up adding. So it's quite a powerful approach, and one that lends a lot of advantages. And then another advantage as well, going back to Andre's presentation, is that since we have the original document available within the client-side browser, that means that we can do low-level editing on the document. It's not just an image representation of the file that we're working with, but rather we have the original PDF document itself. And that's part of why we can do things like true redaction on the document. We can go through and actually eradicate the content underneath the area we're redacting from, fully removing text or clipping out parts of an image. But then we can leave the remainder of the document as is. So if a document maybe is one that contains searchable text or even some valuable metadata, such as things like accessibility information, so alternative text for images and so on, that can help disabled users consume that content. All of that is left as is with our redaction solution because we're working with the document itself. We're not just taking an image and blanking out pixels and then calling that the redacted copy. Rather, it's always working with true PDF content. So it's quite a different experience, and one that's much more similar to kind of a client-side desktop native experience, but transitioned into the browser. So one thing that I've kind of shown here a little bit is our annotation capability. So what I'm going to do is kind of switch to another one of our samples here. I'm actually going to go back to our sort of default sample here and just kind of start to show off some of our annotation capabilities. Let me, 1 second here. We have a specific sample that I guess I wanted to show off. So what I'm going to do is bring up this sample here. It kind of shows how annotations work from different user contexts. So here when we're in this document, as I'm scrolling through and zooming in and so on, when I hover over a given piece of text, then I'm able to select it and mark it up. So we have a lot of different annotations here built in, different shapes, for example, so we can draw circles and squares, polygons and cloudy shapes and all these sorts of things. We can also insert different kinds of annotations too. So for example, we can stamp images, or we have a set of preset stamps as well that can be customized. So if we wanted to say approved or expired or something like that, we can add these onto the page as well. So we have a lot of these annotations that are built in, but we also have extensive customizability available as well. So any of these annotations that I'm showing here, you can change the appearance of or customize to add custom functionality as well. So beyond just how they appear, you can tie them into things like notifying other users or maybe triggering things in a back-end workflow system. So it's something that really is intended as kind of a starting point that you can build out from to create your own kind of custom viewing and annotation experience for users. But getting more into kind of the default experience that we offer, if I click on one of these annotations here, what that will bring up is, and if I click on our comment here, what that will bring up is our comment panel. And so for each annotation that I've made here on the page, there's a corresponding kind of conversation that we've created associated with that annotation. here's the conversation associated with the approved stamp, and here's the one associated with the circle. And for each of these, different users can converse back and forth on this particular annotation. So here, these were created by a user we've just named Justin, but we can switch over to another user, let's say Sally. And Sally can come in and comment on some of this content as well. So Sally could say, you know, this, let's reword this, for example. And can kind of converse back and forth. So you may have used some other document review and approval workflow systems that might rely on kind of similar sorts of actions. So this is often a pretty familiar experience for end users. So a couple of things that we've added to make this experience a little richer for users is, for one thing, we've added the ability to have different annotation states associated with each of these conversations. So we have built-in kind of accepted and rejected, and so some other states as well. These are default states that were specified by the PDF specification. So this is what it says, you know, should be the default state for one of these annotation conversations, these comment threads. But you can actually customize WebViewer to have whatever states you wish. So that way, end users can do things like kind of drive themselves through a workflow for each of these annotations. You know, that way, you know, they could maybe make a highlight, and then you know, for each of these states, you could there could be something like, you know, legal approval or needs a regulatory check or something like that. And so you could have each of those stages of a review and approval workflow encoded here within these annotation states. And what that would mean is that users can kind of drive themselves through whatever process you wish to provide. It's a very useful way of kind of empowering users to follow the workflow themselves without having to hard code all of that into programming logic. Another thing that is very useful in that sort of workflow of these conversations is the ability to add @ mentions for different users too. So let's say that Sally wants to alert the Brian user of the need to reword this content. What Sally could do is type an @ and then, as we saw, that brought up a list of different users that were configured within this demo to show up for these @ mentions. So then we can select the Brian user. And this is something that we have a standard API for, so you can add whatever users you wish into the list that pops up. And then, so let's say Sally wanted to alert Brian, you know, Brian, could you review? And then upon clicking send, inside of WebViewer, then there's a callback that's triggered whenever an @ mention is made inside of a comment. And then that way the user specified by the @ can be automatically alerted. So if you wanted to, say, send an email to a particular user, or, you know, if there's a sort of workflow system you know, within your application, maybe like a task list or something like that, then that could be added for each user that receives an @ mention here. And, you know, again, the idea is to empower users to have an ongoing conversation on each of these comment threads, and to be able to, you know, very easily alert each other to the next stages of what needs to be done in a review and approval workflow stage. The other sort of interesting thing that I wanted to point out about this kind of configuration is that these users can have different permissions as well. So this Brian user is set up as a read-only user. So Brian is able to only see the annotations of others. Brian isn't able to make any new ones or modify any annotations. But by default, users can go in and at least add new ones and modify their own annotations. And then administrative users can modify their own annotations as well as those of others. So if other users come in and make annotations, then administrators could come in and potentially do things like delete them or revise them. And these permission settings are all set up when you instantiate WebViewer on the page. So when we instantiated WebViewer here in this showcase page, what we did was set the current username with this API here. So we just give it a string that says this is the Justin user, and then we give it an API call to change that user's annotation security settings. So the capabilities you know, available to that user now. That user is now an administrator and can edit anyone else's annotations. And then we see the calls for some of these other users. So just a normal user, we just set the current user and then demote them from the administrative role, but also don't make them read-only because we want them to be able to make annotations still. And then a read-only user, we enable the read-only user mode for them, and then we set the current user as their name, just as we do with each of these users. And so the idea of these APIs is to make WebViewer as flexible as possible. We don't control how your users log in or how they're authenticated, but rather what we want to do is to make technology that can integrate as tightly as possible with whatever user authentication and management system you already provide. So you can have users log in, however that's done, and then when you're bringing up WebViewer, you can use that authentication information to enable them to make comments and collaborate with each other. Now, how collaboration would actually work in practice is something that I've kind of been glossing over a little bit. So what I've been showing is just different users making annotations, and then somehow these different users are seeing the same annotations on the same document. But there are a few different ways you can actually make that happen. So one way is that you could actually save these annotations into a PDF. So for example, if I were to go here and click download, that would actually give me a copy of this document along with all of these annotations that I've made here just now. So that's one way that you can go about saving the annotations that a particular user makes. And so I can save this locally, or I could programmatically save this document within WebViewer here. What I could do is that there are APIs for saving the document in WebViewer down to a byte array, and then I could send that byte array up to a REST API and create a new version of the document. And that's one way of going about sharing annotations with others, because then other users could grab that new copy and could see these new annotations. But the downside of that approach is that now every time any user makes an annotation, I'd be creating an entirely new copy of the PDF in the back end. And that's not always a great idea. Sometimes that works for some of our customers, but for most of the time, that's not necessarily the way to go, because adding a new copy for every single annotation is bound to take up quite a bit of space, and it's also adding additional version control that now needs to be managed. Instead of always saving the annotations into the document, what we typically recommend is to save them outside of the document instead. So within WebViewer, we have the ability to save annotations in an XML-based format. It's one called XFDF. How it works is that the underlying document is kept read-only. So this PDF here is just kept as is. And then we encode any annotations or form field changes that have been made in this XML-based format. And so when we're rendering it here inside of WebViewer, the PDF document or whatever file type we're looking at stays as is, and all of the changes are isolated in that XML-based layer. How that works inside of WebViewer is that every time I make an annotation, there's an event that's raised, the annotation changed event. And then at that point, I can get access to that XML. And so I can collaborate with different users by sharing that XML between browsers. Now, this is something that some of our customers have built themselves, this ability to share that XML in between different browsers. And you can use whatever communication mechanism you wish. So some of our users were using a technology called Firebase that Google provided that lets the browser connect directly to a database and share that XML that way. We also have a sample on GitHub for how to create a server-side solution that creates WebSocket connections to every client-side browser, and then that's how the XML is transferred between different browsers. Someone makes an annotation that gets serialized as XML, sent up to the server, and then broadcast down to the other browsers. But in order to make this a bit easier to deploy and get going, we've actually created a new solution recently, collaboration.pdftron.com. And this is kind of a plug-and-play offering. It enables you to get real-time collaboration going in WebViewer in very little code and is quite featureful as well. So it can connect into your database. It's structured as a series of Node modules. So if you are using Node, this is a really great fit. And it can connect to really arbitrary different databases through its resolver technology. And I don't want to go too far in depth into this solution right now, but just kind of wanted to put it out there in case maybe you've taken a look at WebViewer or tried it out within your solution, but haven't yet provided collaboration. This is a very easy way to get it up and running, and is something that we're pretty excited about. So again, it's plug and play, can connect to really any database, and then essentially everything is included, including those @sign notifications. The user management, all of that is sort of available out of the box. So I definitely recommend checking that out and giving that a try. And if you have any questions about any of that, to reach out to our support. Just a bit about our support. So you can get to that here from the bottom of the page there. And if you have any questions as you're trying out WebViewer or any of our technology, you can go to our free trial tech support here, and that will get you in touch with myself and my team. And as well, we have some other great resources here, like frequently asked questions and documentation, and a link to our community, which is another great resource for getting answers on various questions. So this is a public forum that we have. So if you have any questions here, this is a great thing to search if you're looking for any support. But also happy to help out as well if you get in touch with our free trial tech support here as well. So getting back to WebViewer, so this was a bit about kind of the review and approval process that's available out of the box. And as I mentioned, there are quite a few ways to customize the WebViewer sort of experience. So if you want kind of a different view of the document, or kind of the experience than what's directly out of the box, it's quite easy to customize WebViewer in different ways. So one of those ways is that we do have high-level APIs for modifying what WebViewer looks like. So one very common request is the ability to do things like remove, download, and print, just to make it harder for users to grab a copy of the document. We can also remove text selection as well. So that way, here when I'm hovering over this, I'm not able to select this text to potentially copy and paste out of the document. We can remove other things as well, like say we might want to remove different annotation types for different users. This is kind of a common request because of the need to kind of slim things down for different users. So some users who might not be as tech savvy and might not be as inclined towards learning about the all of the features of a document viewer that's deployed within their solution, they might really just want a very slimmed down UI that's sort of kind of idiot proof, as it were, where they can go in and it's very obvious what tools they need to use, and there's very little learning or bootstrapping that they need to do to get productive in a system. And so the ability to do things like remove different buttons is very helpful there. And this is something that's quite easy to do with our APIs too. So we actually see that when I'm doing something like removing the print button, what that's translating to is this call here, just instance.ui.disable elements, and then we give it the element name. So really anything within the WebViewer UI then can be customized and taken out if you wish. And additionally, if you were to create a custom annotation, like maybe you made your own specialized highlight annotation that say embeds custom values or metadata, that's something that through these same kinds of APIs you can add directly into the toolbar here. Now, if you do run into roadblocks here in terms of how far you can take that customization, what we've done is kind of given a bit of an escape hatch for customization, in that we've posted the entire UI source code of WebViewer to GitHub. So really everything that you see here outside of this kind of just the document itself, so everything to do with the buttons or the comment threads, or the panels for viewing different pages in the document, or toggling layers, or viewing signatures, et cetera, all of that can be customized. We have the full source code posted to GitHub. It's written in React-based JavaScript, so it should be relatively easy for most JavaScript programmers to go in and take a look at how things are done, and to potentially customize some of those components that we have built into the viewer. So that's another way of going about customizing what WebViewer looks like and how it behaves, and what the user experience is like. And then we have another sort of approach when it comes to customization, and that is that you can show your own viewer. So for example, many of our customers will, they already have a viewer that their users have acclimated to, that they've gotten used to over years or potentially even decades. And what they're looking to do is still continue to use that same interface, but take advantage of WebViewer's capabilities under the hood. So an example of that might be that they might want to take advantage of WebViewer's advanced rendering capabilities. So again, we've had WebViewer as a product and built from our PDFTron rendering for the past couple of decades. So it's a very well-tested rendering engine. It's also one that has advanced features that some users absolutely need, like support for advanced transparency or overprint settings and custom color profiles. And as well, we have a lot of document processing capabilities built into the toolkit as well. So, if there was an existing viewer that maybe you wanted to add additional functionality like new watermarking or the ability to stamp onto the document, then that's something that you could take advantage of without necessarily having to change your entire viewer. So what this sample is showing is a third-party viewer that we got from GitHub, this page flipping viewer here. So the idea is that it kind of is reproducing sort of the physical experience of turning a page, which some users might find kind of reassuring, I guess, when viewing a document online. This is something that could be something that you might want to stick with then to avoid confusing users or disorienting them. And so what this sample is actually doing is taking that third-party page flipping UI and using WebViewer's document rendering under the hood. So WebViewer is converting PDF pages into images and then feeding that into this viewing solution. So as a result, the user is now able to take advantage of WebViewer's highly accurate PDF rendering, but in the same UI, and for the end user, it might seem like nothing has changed, just that the rendering is now working correctly. And then, if you wanted to add additional capabilities into this, like maybe pre-processing a document or document conversion once this has been approved, then that's something that can be directly leveraged here in the viewer. So when it comes to UI customization, there are quite a few different options there and quite a few techniques that can be leveraged, including the WebViewer's built-in APIs, the source code that we have posted on GitHub, and then the ability to integrate with third-party viewers that your users might already be familiar with. So some of that capability, that document capability, has been pretty widely expanded in some of our recent releases. And one of the things that we're most excited about is our ability to generate and edit documents inside of the browser. So when it comes to document editing, that's something that WebViewer is quite suited for, since, as I mentioned earlier, it's essentially our native toolkit that we've built up over the years, compiled over to JavaScript, and that's able to modify PDF documents and other file types directly inside of the browser. So that means that we can do things like, say, rotating pages inside of the document or reordering different pages in a file. We can do things like delete pages from the PDF or insert new blank pages. Really quite powerful capabilities, very similar to what one might be used to within a native document viewer or desktop software. Beyond this kind of document processing and the ability to merge documents together and split out pages, etc., we've also added some document generation capabilities recently. So one of those is our ability to take Microsoft Office documents and replace different tags in those files with text or images. So here what I've done, this is loading up a Word file that has some different tags that we've added in here. We're using this syntax where it's delimited by double squiggly brackets, so-called mustache templates. And so we have a variety of placeholders inside of this document that we can fill out. And then how the API works is that we can pass in different values, either text or image data, within JSON. And then when we're converting the Office file here, we then replace those tags as part of that, kind of as a side effect, almost. So if I click Fill Template, then that's going to fill this template out. And we see it's replaced first name with Janice, and the date with a particular date. And also it's filled out table data as well. So we have some information here about particular rows in a table, and those are then added into this document. We have some more complicated samples for this as well. So we've recently added in the latest release of this the capability for having loops as well as conditional statements. So here we have a variable number of rows that we can fill out inside of this table, and then we have the capability of only adding in data if it actually applies or not. So for example, whether or not this payment is past due, we have full control over whether that statement actually appears inside of the file. So these are some ways of changing content within the document programmatically. And then recently we've also added the capability for directly editing text inside of a PDF page. So here, for example, I'm going to bring up that same document again, and when I've entered PDF text editing mode, what that's done is detected the different paragraphs of text on each PDF page here. So that's actually quite a powerful mechanism. So I can do things like take blocks of text and move them around on the page, change how they're sort of formatted and how the text reflows. So here I can arrange this this text here and rearrange it. I can also go in and directly edit the text as well. So if I want to say, change this from PDF to document, do so directly in line. And then as we see, the text then correctly reflows within that box here. So this is very exciting technology. It's something that is exclusive to PDFTron and something that really opens up the capabilities for working with PDFs in the browser. This kind of functionality is pretty unprecedented and something that we think our customers will get a lot of use out of. So that's all I had for today. So thanks very much for attending this webinar. And if you have any further questions, once again, please do feel free to reach out to myself and my team, support at pdftron.com, or through our forums online here. Yeah, looking forward to working with you as you integrate our technology into your solution. Thanks so much.